Welcome back, terrestrials, to We Made Rob Zombie Cry. In this episode, we have a very special guest, one half of Camp Nightmares podcast, JB. And
Yo.
as usual, when we have a guest on, we let them pick the movie. He chose Barbarian from 2022, and it's found on HBOMAX. So we're going to jump right into it.
Hell yeah. Hey, what's up, man? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, yeah, no
I
problem.
appreciate it, man. Yeah. So I chose Barbarian, man. Which, it was kind of a cheap choice because it like just came out, but like it's, every 2 or 3 years, I think, there's a kind of under the radar genre film that happens that
Mhm,
just blows my. Like Hereditary was that film, just
mhm.
blows minds. Midsummer was that, like everything Ari Aster has done.
Yeah, pretty much,
But
yes.
and I feel like Barbarian's in that same category where another great example is X, Ty West's X, I think
Mhm,
was one of those. But this movie falls firmly in that category for me because it really did fly under the radar. Like there was very little
mhm.
info given about it. Like I really love that the trailer basically gives nothing away.
Right.
Um,
And the little bit of response that I did to see to the movie was almost in a negative light. I
right.
saw people basically like, yeah, it's just another run-of-the-mill horror movie. And I'm like, okay, I mean, whatever. I saw that
Yeah,
like two or three times and I was like, well, I guess I'm not gonna watch it. And then, you popped up with it. So I was like, well, there we go. Like now's my excuse to watch it. I'm not going to let Facebook tell me not to watch this movie.
exactly.
I'm gonna let JB tell me to watch this movie.
We, well, careful because we don't tell people what to do at Camp Nightmare. But
Well,
I
this is video waste,
I
and we
firmly suggest.
absolutely do.
That's fair. It's funny. Jordan and I have coined this term, Hatonists.
Hmm.
Hatonists. There's this particular kind of genre fan that lately, say the last like 3 or 4 years,
Hmm.
no matter what the movie is, everything that comes out that's new,
Nope.
that's in any way just immediately gets eviscerated by
Yeah,
these fans. And I think what you're describing is very much what happened to Barbarian. And it's interesting because it's like, what do you want, genre fans? Like, do
right,
you
right.
want to know everything about the movie walking into it? Do you want to know nothing about it? Everyone that I know that saw this movie before me said, "Hey, man, the one thing to do is just know as little as possible about this film."
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I 100%. I feel like we're going to spoil the fuck out of this film for people. So if you haven't seen it
Yeah,
yet,
yeah,
maybe pause here, go
yeah.
watch it because we're not going to hold back. I don't think.
Right, right.
Um, but it is a movie that is best walked into blind.
Yeah,
Period.
absolutely.
And there's a lot of we'll get into it. There's a lot of layers in the movie. Um, so was there a character element of the movie that stole the show? I mean, obviously, Mother,
Yeah.
it comes to mind immediately, but that's sort of, again, that's like the cheap answer, right? Like,
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
course, the weird, multi-generational inbred freak that
Yeah.
breastfeeds people against their will is going to stick out. But
Right, right.
um, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Justin Long's character stuck out to
Yes.
me
Yes.
because of something you said earlier before we started recording. That the character he plays is just so unlike
Hmm.
who I'm pretty sure he is in real. Like I don't know
Yeah.
him, so like
Yeah.
he very well may be an absolute monster, and I just didn't know that.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
but
do
it,
I do feel like I get a little like you see him in movies and stuff and he's always like the nerdy friend that's chasing after the hot girl or whatever the case is. He's never a bad guy. And then in this one he is just scum of the earth. It is
absolutely.
terrible. Like he is the epitome of terrible.
Well,
And
he's a Me Too, a hashtag Me Too archetype, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah, exactly,
he
exactly.
is he is an amalgam of all of the sleazy,
Hmm.
rich white dudes that we know. That you're like, man, I know that dude has date raped
Yeah,
somebody. Like you just
yeah.
look at him and you're like, he smells like Polo Sport and like fucking drives a Dodge Neon.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, and so
he's
I
definitely my standout character for this one as well. I and as shitty as that is to say about the type of character he plays, uh, I think it was a ballsy choice. I like Justin Long. The boy can't catch a break on his eyeballs to save his life, but
It's true.
uh
True.
like, it just he's like the most commanding energy in the movie, even though
Yeah.
at times it's pathetic and at times it's manipulative. He's the one outside of maybe Tess, because she's just tough as nails, and
Well, and I wanted to point out that while Justin Long's character did stick out to me, I think one of the major reasons he does is because of Tess. Georgina Campbell is
mhm.
the actress that plays her. Um, because the juxtaposition between the two of them is the real crux of the film. Man, that sounded like such pretentious film nerd shit. The How they play the two against each other and what the other represents, what they each represent to one another, is sort of the backbone of the movie, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
it's you're experiencing the same horror but from two very different
Hmm.
perspectives, and like, you can argue that Justin Long sort of deserves everything that happens to him.
Yeah, absolutely.
um However, Mother doesn't know anything about him, right? And that's
Right.
sort of the most horrifying thing, is that like Mother's horror is distributed without prejudice.
Hmm.
um Everything else in the movie is prejudiced, but not Mother's love.
Yeah, I was
um
gonna say, is it horror? Because I mean, she's just trying to love. Like,
yeah, well,
I found myself feeling bad for her by the
oh,
end
of
of
course
the,
she's
like,
absolutely a
yeah,
victim.
yeah, yeah. So like, saying her horror is distributed, it's like, I mean, yeah, it's horrifying to us because we know it's wrong, but she's just trying to love. So
That's fair. That's fair. You're right. You're right. Show breaker for me was
yeah,
Bill Skarsgård. Here's why.
really, okay,
He could have not been in this movie, and it wouldn't have made a goddamn bit of difference. Like, his character meant nothing to the plot
oh, you're
ultimately.
pulling the old
It's the Tommy Lee.
Indiana Jones lost Raiders of the Lost Ark argument. I
It's or
mean,
like the Tommy Lee Jones in No Country for Old Men,
yeah,
right? Like, it's
yeah,
that argument that like that.
yeah,
I'm not saying it's not a great character. I'm not saying Bill Skarsgård doesn't do his best to act that character. He does great. It's Bill Skarsgård.
yeah,
He's a Skarsgård.
yeah,
Acting is
yeah,
in their blood. But
yeah.
again, I get that his character's kind of there to build like a red herring of tension
Hmm.
before watching his fucking head just get like
Yeah,
smashed like a watermelon in a Gallagher show.
yeah,
Um, which is great, and it's. I will say that that's one of my favorite kills
yeah,
in this film.
for sure.
And it's actually one of very few actual kills that you see.
Yeah,
But again, like, it kind of, once I realized that he was just a red herring and a name they threw in it to make people who were on the fence about seeing it be like, well, Bill Skarsgård's in it.
yeah,
Um, it kind of like it took a lot away from me. Took a lot away from me.
yeah. I can totally get that. And I think that's a very valid point. For me personally, I feel like Justin Long is also my showbreaker, just because of the nature of his character.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I feel like Bill Skars they could have flipped Justin Long and Bill Skarsgård and made a better movie.
And you
Um,
would have believed it if it was Bill
exactly,
Skarsgård in that
exactly.
character, right? Like,
Yes,
because Bill
yes.
Skarsgård's kind of sleazy already. Like,
Yeah,
anybody
yeah,
who's
yeah.
seen Hemlock Grove knows that he can play sleazy really well.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I feel like given the chance or flipping those roles, he could have brought a better element to it, and it would have been more believable because, again, Justin Long is just he seems like such a sweetheart. So it was hard for me to buy him. Like, when he's driving in the car and he's like singing and like, before everything goes down, that's who I picture Justin Long as in real life. So it was hard for me to believe him as like this Me Too person and like this manipulator and this out for himself guy. But Skarsgård, I could believe that. He was giving off that kind of vibe to begin with in the movie. So
Right.
with those two roles flipped, I think it could have been better. But yeah, still Justin Long took me out of the movie just because I was like, why this doesn't make any sense for you? Like,
Well, I wonder if both of them read the script, and each one of them. I wonder if after both of them read the script. I wonder if Justin Long was like. I wonder if they wanted them for the opposite parts at first, and Justin Long was like, "Fuck that! I'm not going to die in the first act." And Bill Skarsgård was like, "I'm tired of playing sleazy white dudes." Like I
That's a
wonder
good
if that
point. Yeah.
actually went down because it feels like it may have been at like a bargaining point for both of them.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a very good possibility. I mean, they probably sat down at Denny's somewhere and was like, "You want to switch roles, man? Because like I'm
yeah,
tired of this." Um, I think it's an interesting flip because I it's very easy for me to see them having flipped roles. So that's probably, that I don't know that we'll ever find that information out, but that is something that could very easily have happened.
yeah. Well, I think the only other real show breaker for me in terms of like really taking me out of the narrative and reminding me that this is, it's a Hollywood film. Um, Andre, the homeless guy.
Mhm,
So I understand the point of that character, but like the
mhm.
whole playing him up to be a bad guy, not a bad guy, but playing him up to be someone who's trying to harm Tess at first. Like, you got to get out of that house, girl. Like, it was just real predictable what was going to happen with that. The homeless dude is the guy that's going to save her. Um,
Yeah.
and it
So
just go ahead.
oh, well, I was just gonna say, so like I didn't see that. Like I'm like I kind of go dumb into movies, and then when I
Mm-hmm.
think about them, I'm like, oh yeah. But when he's running down the street going, "Hey, little girl," like to me, maybe that's because I'm white and like, I'm like, oh, this homeless dude is going to cause harm. He lives in this terrible neighborhood, like he's looking to hurt her, and that's
Mm-hmm.
me like pushing judgment out on that character. But at the same time, like without the knowledge of all the other aspects of the movie, that's all I could think it was
Sure.
because
Sure.
we didn't know, well, I've been here
Well, and
15 years and
I think the character is written with the idea in mind that there are people who have inherent bias,
yeah,
because we all do, right? And like, good on you for pointing that out. That like, that's what inherent bias looks like, right?
yeah.
And I guess for me, like I grew up around a lot. I was raised very evangelical Christian
Hmm.
and grew up around a lot of like really clean cut, squeaky clean on the surface upper or maybe not upper middle class, but at least middle class, well-to-do evangelical white people. So
Hmm.
like I don't trust them in
Right,
any way, shape. Like I
right,
assume that the white guy is the villain all the
right,
time.
right.
So for me, when I see that dude running up behind her, I'm like, oh, that dude's trying to help you.
Yeah.
like,
Well, so
uh,
the funny thing about my bias in that situation is because I was raised in a urban neighborhood by a black family. So
sure.
when those kinds of dudes came running at you, they never meant, "Hey, let me save you from this monster."
Right. They were like,
They
I'm going to
wanted,
stab you for some
yeah,
crack.
exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's kind of like my a life experience and my whiteness combining to like do this to this person. But yeah, I guess I could see why, especially if you have the movie figured out as quickly as, some people would, I could see why you'd be like, ah, that's just like a trope of like another red herring basically in the
Right.
movie.
Right. Well, and as soon as honestly, one thing I really appreciated about this film is that I did not. Once they opened the third act with the flashback, that's when I
Hmm.
figured out what was happening.
Yeah.
Kind of like, or at least I got enough of it that I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be the twist in it.
Right.
Um, but up until that point, man, I will admit that I was legitimately like baffled as to
Hmm.
how this movie was going to play out.
Yeah. Yeah. I was too.
So in terms of like CGI and effects, I really don't think there was much CGI at all. And I
Hmm.
think the practical in this was a little underutilized. I think they could have gone bloodier and maybe a little bit more visceral with some of the kills. Like the
Hmm.
Bill Skarsgård kill was fucking great when he just
Yeah.
gets his head smashed against the wall. But beyond that, like there's not really a lot of great kills in it.
No,
Um,
there definitely isn't.
However, the mother's suit. So that's a dude that plays mother, by the way. His name is, I'll tell you, I have it right here. His name is Matthew Patrick Davis.
Hmm.
He's a character actor, very similar to like Doug Jones, the guy that the famous like lanky character actor that
Right.
plays all the monsters in Guillermo del Toro. He's of that ilk, and that suit was fucking great.
It
Um,
was great.
yeah, it's the stuff of nightmares, right? It's
It
the kind of
really
stuff
is.
that only like your lizard brain can conceive of.
Hmm.
Um,
I
and
felt
it's simple.
I felt it was a little reminiscent to when Beverly goes back to her apartment and that
Yep.
woman comes running out. I felt it was a little reminiscent to that, but somebody
Yeah.
was like, I can do that better. So watch me do it better.
Or I
And
can do
then,
that. I can do that in a more real world setting, right?
right.
Like
Yeah,
because in
exactly.
it, it's very there's one of the things I really love about Andy Muschietti's version of it is
Mhm.
that there's this weird sort of lullaby-ish off reality to it, right? Like there, it's the whole film. You're like something is very off about the reality of Derry, Maine.
Mhm.
And that scene with Beverly when she goes back to Mrs. Kirsch, I think is the name of the character.
Mhm.
There's something very fairy tale-ish about that witch running at her from the shadows.
Yeah.
And with Mother and Barbarian, there's something very real world about it. There's something
Yeah.
very like almost gritty and grimy
Mhm.
about it. But I like that comparison because physically, it's the same. It's
Yeah.
essentially the same monster.
And another thing
And
that I appreciate about this, not to cut you off, sorry.
no
Um,
worries. Go ahead.
uh, so like the tunnel system seems kind of small, like
Mm-hmm.
a tunnel system would be. And they chose to make Mother a large person versus a tiny little creepy, the Descent style, like
Right, which is what you
quick
would think it would
moving thing.
be if they were,
Exactly.
yeah, if she was raised in that weird tunnel system, you'd think
Hmm.
she'd be like some sort of weird ghoulie.
Yeah. Yeah, like I mean, they're chuds, but at the same time, like they're not tiny little creepy things.
Yeah,
This one specifically is very large. And
yeah,
the one of the things, like, so the homeless guy, he throws out this line that leads me to believe there's more coming, because he says that that woman is not the worst thing down there. Now, he could have
yeah.
been referring to Justin Long's character, because,
No, I think he's referring to
but
Richard Brake's character.
yeah, but like he was immobile. So like I
Yeah,
wonder if,
that's
like, because of the
you know,
cages and stuff, like it leads me to believe that there's more of them, and that tunnel system has not fully been explored.
well, and it might, it's Hollywood doing
Yeah.
genre film. It's Hollywood doing what should have been a pure indie horror film and
Yeah.
kind of making it a little bit. And this has happened twice this year that I know of that I've been paying attention to. It happened with this and it happened with Smile,
Hmm.
where there's this film that's, and I feel like this is a little bit more relevant to Smile than Barbarian because I think Barbarian got left alone for the most part in terms
Hmm.
of creative direction. But like in Smile, there are definitive places in Smile where you can tell that the guy who made Smile was trying to make one movie, and Hollywood was like, no, 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 this is mainstream. We need you to do this so we can
Hmm.
guarantee our return on this film. And there's a couple moments in Barbarian where I kind of felt that way. The whole Richard Brake's character, or having Richard Brake play that character, I think
Hmm.
was probably a very Hollywood decision. I think in the genre community, he is very much riding a high right now. And I
Yeah.
think that was probably a Hollywood decision to like, this is how we get the nerds to come see this. We put
Hmm.
Richard Brake in it. Um, so in terms of like wow moments, um, what you just mentioned, I think was maybe my favorite physical set in it was the tunnel system.
Hmm.
Not only that, but the way they shot movement in the tunnel system.
Hmm.
Um, I love that both Tess and Justin Long's character are using their cell phone
Hmm.
flashlights for the majority of their scenes in the tunnels. I think it's super effective.
Yeah.
Right? It's so, and well, that was the other thing I was going to say about the mother suit is that it's so fucking simple,
Yeah.
right? Like that monster is so simple. There's, you don't need a lot of backstory. You don't need to know that monster's motivations, right? Like
Right.
it's just a crazy inbred um monster. But the fact that they do give it motivation and they do give it like a tiny bit of backstory
Yeah.
just makes it that much scarier in
Hmm.
my mind.
Absolutely.
Because of what you said earlier, that you kind of sympathize with that
Hmm.
character a little bit, like, wow, you're just a victim, but you're
Yeah.
also gonna murder me.
Right.
Um, so like the tunnel system really stuck out to me. Um, Kind of the opposite of a sentiment. Wow, is how much this movie played up the derelict Detroit suburb.
Yeah.
Um, I've spent time in that area. I played a lot of music in that area. There is
Mhm.
no suburb of Detroit that looks like that. Like that's not a thing.
Right.
Like that neighborhood looked like fucking Cabrini Green from like
Yeah.
1990 Candy or 1992 Candyman.
Yeah.
Um, that doesn't exist in real life. Like, you know why that doesn't exist? Because liberals exist. That's why. Because liberals would never let that happen. That is beyond their line. And I'm saying that as a filthy, like commie loving, labor loving liberal. Um, because I'm like truly though, like social services exist so that things like that can't happen. Let's see here. Sound and score. So the score was kind of mediocre to me.
Yeah, I
Like I
don't have
feel bad.
anything to
Yeah,
say.
exactly. It
Like,
didn't
I
stick
mean,
out. Like again, not to keep bringing Smile into this, but comparatively, like the score in Smile is one
mhm,
of the scariest things about that film.
mhm,
Like the sound design and music in Smile is used so perfectly. Again, it's really reminiscent of like Ari Aster and Robert Eggers' use of
mhm.
sound in film, where like they use Ari Aster in in both of his films has like a sound cue. In Hereditary, it's that noise,
Yeah, yeah,
and then in Midsummer, it's that
yeah.
thing. It's Smile is reminiscent of that, like
Okay.
when they like the way they use soundscapes and scores. Barbarian, nothing stuck out. Like
Yeah, there's
I don't
like
even.
there's the silence in the tunnels that is kind of deafening,
Yeah,
because there wouldn't be noise and the
yeah,
necessity to be quiet. Uh, and in combination of like just the like we've all used our cell phone flashlights to find things, and you're always like, damn, it's not quite bright enough to see what I'm doing. So like it
yep.
worked perfectly in the tunnel system, but like also that combination of being able to see about a foot and a half in front of you and then pitch black and then silence. I think that the combination of those two things worked, not one or the other individually. But
Mm.
yeah, so right next to sound and score, I wrote nah, because like there's just nothing, like there's
Above
nothing.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's nothing stuck out. Like I know that there was music in that film. I just
right.
don't remember any of it.
Well, the only
Um,
thing I remember is I don't even remember what song it was, but I remember Justin Long singing a song in his car,
yeah,
but
yeah,
that's
yeah.
it. Like that's the only
Yeah.
actual music that I remember. As far as score, it's just like, neighborhood sounds, house sounds, like creaking doors and
Well,
things
and
like that.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head though, is lack of sound in the tunnels.
Hmm.
So I've said this. I was actually talking to my wife about this earlier tonight. One of the scariest things that I've seen, maybe the scariest thing that I've seen, are the thing that scared me the most in any modern horror movie. And It Follows. One of the scariest things about that movie is there's no score in
Hmm.
It Follows, right? It's just background noise.
Hmm.
There's a scene in It Follows where the girls are like in the bedroom,
Hmm.
and there's one of the things that horror directors will do to kind of subconsciously let you know you're about to be really scared is
Hmm.
they'll have like a slow crescendo
Right.
of a sound happen, right? And there's none of that in It Follows. So there's the scene where they're all in their bedroom and the door opens and it's the creature taking the form of that giant guy.
Yeah.
And he just like dips his head under the door, and
Hmm.
there's no sound cue to let you know that's gonna happen. It just fucking
Hmm.
happens. And every dude, I own that movie. I've watched that movie probably at least 10 times. It never doesn't scare me when that happens. And like I know that it's coming, and I'm still like, nope, I'm gonna shit myself and not be able to sleep tonight. And and I think that Barbarian sort of taps into a little bit of that with
Yeah.
the tunnel scenes, that like you don't there's a couple jump scares in the tunnel that you have no warning for whatsoever.
Right.
The first time Mother comes out and grabs Bill Skarsgård by the head, you
Hmm.
know he's freaking out, but you have no idea why, and there's
Yeah.
no sound cue to let you know that Mother's going to come running out of the darkness and just
Hmm.
smash his head.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like maybe the lack of sound is what did it. Yeah,
I'm
like
gonna
what
have
did it for
to I'm gonna have to go back and like
him, right?
recant a bunch of statements about that it follows, because like I was like, oh yeah, sexually transmitted ghost, cool, like
I mean,
whatever,
you're
and
not
then
wrong.
right, but also like, that's the funny thing, like this is, I'm enjoying this a lot because we kind of take movies at face value, and you guys look at more than just face value. So like the cross pollination of like how you look at movies and how we look at movies. Like we were supposed to review It Follows, and we were like, we sat down and we were like, sexually transmitted ghost. All right, fuck it, let's do Point Break, and did something else, which
I mean, listen, man,
obviously Point Break,
if you made me choose between Point Break and It Follows, I'm going Point Break all
right,
day. Like
obviously any human would, but still,
Swayze,
like,
Keanu Reeves, get out of
yeah,
here.
yeah, exactly. But at the same time, like, I didn't give it its just due because I wrote it off. And the more I
Heard.
see it, and I was watching that Shudder's 101 most
Mm-hmm.
horrifying, and it was up there in like the top 10, and I was like, holy
Yeah.
shit.
I
All
mean, dude, that
right.
movie's truly terrifying. Like,
Yeah, it is. And the second time I watched it, it was better than the first. Like I blew it off the first time.
well, and one of the things I really and I'm not going to dwell too much on It Follows, but one of the things I really appreciate about it is that yes, it is a sexually transmitted ghost, and
Yeah.
there's an opportunity there to really play up that 80s trope that if you have sex, you're gonna die.
Right.
And there is an element of that in this, right?
A little bit,
But
yeah.
there's also the element of this girl is not just metaphorically fighting for her dignity as a woman,
Right.
right? Because there's that metaphor there of I exercised my right to have sex with whoever I wanted to, and
Hmm.
now I'm being literally like spiritually slut shamed as a result. Like
Right.
there's an
Yeah. Yeah.
actual demon chasing me now.
Right. Right.
And there's the metaphor there, but so there's the metaphor of her sort of pushing back against that and saying like,
Mhm.
nah, I'm going to take charge of my own existence. And like, yeah, it sucks that she has to go sleep around more to get rid of it, and like
Right.
that she's intentionally transmitting this. But
Right.
anyway, so the first question you have for me is, would I pay to see it in theaters? The honest answer to that is no.
Okay.
Well, would I have? Yes.
Okay.
Did I? No, because my wife was so pregnant at the time that I was like, I can't just leave the house for 2 hours.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But I would have paid to see that in theaters.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I'm right there with you. Yeah.
was it a thrill or a kill? I'm gonna lean towards thrill.
Yeah.
I think there's more good about it than bad.
Hmm.
But again, like if you're somebody who's walking into this just looking for an opportunity to hate on new horror or on horror that doesn't necessarily fit into a
Hmm.
established category, you're just gonna hate this, like because that's who
Yeah.
you are as a person.
Yeah. I found it.
Um,
I found it thrilling. I mean, we've watched some recently that I was just like, this killed me to watch it to like get through this. So like
yeah, man.
this in comparison, yeah, I definitely got to go. It's thrilling.
Do I think it would be a cult classic? Yeah, I do. I
Interesting.
think well, I think it's just offbeat enough that and we were kind of talking about this before we started recording. There's a lot of layers to this film.
Right.
There's an element of classism to this film, obviously.
Hmm.
There's an element of gender politics, there's an element of race politics, right? Like you have this Georgina Campbell's character Tess, who is a person of color who's trying to do real good, trying to get a job in Detroit, staying at what she thought was an Airbnb that she has to fight for to get.
Hmm.
And then there's Justin Long's character, who is the opposite of that. He's this
Right.
super privileged white guy who, is hiding out at this Airbnb that he owns because because he's just been accused of raping someone.
Right.
And he full on admits to actually raping that
Yeah.
person
Yeah. Yeah.
within minutes of him being in the film. So like, there's never a question about his character, and it's sort of,
Right.
so it kind of weighs them against each other. And then there's the element of like derelict houses and gentrification and
Hmm.
like society as a whole saying that these communities of color don't matter, so we're just going to let them degenerate. So there's a lot of layers to this film, and I think
Right.
that time is going to treat it as a cult film as a
Hmm.
result. I think that kids are probably going to be unpacking this in film classes in like 20 years. Do I think it's going to be as much of a cult classic as like Hereditary or The Witch? No. Um, but I think that it's going to be up there. I think it's going to be in the same category that like I Drink Your Blood is now. Like go
Right.
back and watch I Drink Your Blood from the 70s. Huge cult film now. At the time, it was like a miracle that it got made.
Right.
Yeah. And go
Yeah,
ahead.
I mean, we know that, cult classics don't have a formula. It's just kind of what stands the test of time.
Yeah.
And I personally, I don't know. I mean, like I could definitely see it being used in film classes, but as far as a cult classic film, I don't know. I feel like it's too good to be cult classic. Like there's
Well, I
because of
mean,
the layers and stuff. It when I think cult classics, I just think of like those schlocky B-rated 80s horror
really,
movies that we love because we can turn our brains off for 5 minutes.
that's
And
fair. Okay.
so but that's what it means to me, so that's why I say no. It means something different to you, so that's why you say yes. And that works as well. Like we don't.
Sure. When I say when I think cult classic, I think more movies that manage to exist in the mainstream but still be off the beaten path. Great example would be like Pulp Fiction, right? Like Pulp
Okay.
Fiction is undisputably a cult classic, also a very mainstream film comparatively, right?
Yeah,
Like
very. Yeah.
maybe not when it was originally released, and maybe not before it did the Sundance Cannes
Right.
circuit, but ultimately that movie was released in a very mainstream way, and it was a very cult film. Or I think like Polanski's The Fearless Vampire Hunters, right?
Hmm.
Like, or like
So
Psycho. Psycho's a cult
right.
classic, right? But it's
Yeah.
also extremely mainstream. So I see Barbarian more in that category. That
Right,
like
right.
you're right, it is extremely mainstream for what it is.
Hmm.
Especially when you look at all the other indie horror that's been made this year
Right,
that's fucking
right,
incredible, that's
right.
never going to be disseminated in the same way.
Right. When
But
I
yeah,
when I say cult classic, I think like Frankenhooker or Reanimator
that's fair.
or like
Yeah.
even a newer example would be like The Dark and the Wicked, something that was incredible, but also
Oh
everybody
yeah.
just kind of went, yeah, I mean, okay, it will have a
I turned
reliving.
Jordan I turned Jordan onto that movie. I think I was in between jobs at the time when that movie came. No, that movie came out like right after the pandemic started, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I was in between jobs because I was
yeah.
unemployed when the pandemic started. And so I watched it like because there's just nothing else to watch at that point.
Right.
I'd watched everything, and this new movie came out on Shudder. And I was fucking floored by that movie. And I
Hmm.
immediately texted Jordan at like 2 a.m. and was like, bro, you need to watch this
Hmm.
movie. And yeah, I was shocked at how little coverage and how little love that movie got.
Yeah, yeah,
It was brilliant. It was
yeah.
fucking brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I
Um,
came I came to the table when we reviewed it on the channel, and I was like, "This movie's amazing." And
yeah.
my co-host was like, "Yeah, I mean, it's okay." And like
Well, I mean,
later,
like, what
he
a
was like,
great
"Yeah, no, I get it now," but like it took a couple of
right.
viewings, and I was like, "All right, that's fair." But
See, I have movies like that. I have movies
yeah,
I
exactly.
was it just as a Star Wars nerd, it took me 3 times watching Rogue One to like that movie,
Mhm.
and now that's my favorite Star Wars film ever, like out of any
Interesting.
of them. Um, but so the last question you asked was for stars.
Right.
How many stars would I give it? From 1 to 5, I'm gonna go a strong 3.5.
Okay.
Um, like I said, there's more right with it than there is wrong with it, but there's
Right.
just enough wrong with it that I got to take some off.
Yeah.
So I think 3.5. You're
Yeah.
right, like more than halfway there.
Yeah.
Like it's more
Yeah.
than halfway there.
Right, right. It's not a run of the mill movie, but it's not fantastic by any means.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I'm right there with you with 3.5. I considered three, and then I was like, that's not being fair to the movie. The movie was better
Mm-hmm.
than a run of the mill movie that is just shit out by Hollywood. So I'm going to give it its half a star for that.
Yeah.
Usually Boops will get you a star, if not half a star, on
These
his
boobs are not
channel.
getting you that.
They're
Mm-mm.
no, they almost
Mm-mm.
lost it a star.
Well, and I love that they had to put nudity in the
Yeah,
list of
yeah,
things that they
yeah,
made it an R-rated film, and it was like,
yeah,
bro, there is like there are going to be
yeah.
so many disappointed 13 and 14
Oh
year old
yeah,
boys that
absolutely.
like rented this like, oh sweet, there's tits
Yeah,
in this, like
yeah,
just ruin that kid's
yeah,
life.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah,
It's kind of
that's
like
horrible.
seeing the bathtub lady in The Shining for the first time,
Yeah,
where you're like, oh
yeah,
sweet tit, oh
yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
You can take those back. You can
yeah,
take the nudity
exactly,
out of this one. Yeah, I mean
exactly.
that scene with Justin Long was so uncomfortable. I mean, ugh, ugh.
Yeah, and like I think that's why they had to make his character such a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Because if they didn't, like at some point you would have really felt sympathy for him.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, Another great example of that people this is an obscure poll that I'm gonna throw out there. And this is what we do on Camp Nightmare, by the way. If anybody that's listening that are watching campnightmare.com, this is literally what Jordan and I do is we go on tangents and talk about obscure shit that has nothing to do with the source material. High Fidelity, there's a movie called High Fidelity with John Cusack in it.
Yeah, of
And
course.
it's based on a book written by a guy named Nick Hornby. And the main character in the it's very similar to the book. The major difference is that they moved the setting from London to Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
But in the book, the main character, Rob, that John Cusack plays in the film, is an utter piece of shit. Like he
Yeah.
is not a good person.
Mm-hmm.
And you really get a sense of that in the book. And like a big part of the book is like it basically saying that like, you know, this guy's a piece of shit, but he still deserves to get a break at some point. So in the movie, like Rob is still a piece of shit, but I think they intentionally cast John Cusack in that role because they were like, anyone else wouldn't be likable enough for this movie to sell. Because if it was
Yeah.
anyone else, you'd be like, this dude, like, what is even the point of this character? He's a piece of crap.
Yeah.
And similar with forgot where I was going with that. But
I mean that brings up a good point. I don't know if it was your point, but using Justin Long as that shitty character is it does make me still feel bad for him during that like nursing scene
yeah,
because
well,
like
you know what it does is it makes you hold sympathy for him way longer than you would have otherwise, which makes his ultimate betrayal of Tess at the end when he just like pushes her off the
oh
water
dude,
tower.
I was like,
And it just
come on, man.
well, at that point though, you're just like, all right, like I should have seen that coming. Like I
Yeah,
should have known
yeah,
that he was
yeah.
going to do that.
Right after he gives that, I can change. Like he's clearly talking about the rape, not the situation at hand. And he's like, I can change. People can change. Push you off here. It's like, oh, you fell. You fell. Remember, I reached out for you and you fell. Like, yeah, fucking.
Yeah, and I mean, like you know, at that point he's just selling the character even more with that
Yeah,
whole scene
yeah,
where he tries to
yeah,
gaslight her into believing
yeah,
that
yeah.
he didn't push her. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I need to hop off of here because my baby needs to get fed here.
Cool deal, man.
But thank you so much for having me, man.
Yeah, anytime, dude. Anytime you got a movie you want to talk about.
Hell yeah. All right, man. I will talk to you later.
All right, man. Take it easy. And that is our review of Barbarian. Check out Camp Nightmare podcast. They go into a lot of detail with the subjects that they talk about. It's an awesome podcast. I'm a big fan of it, and you should check it out if you don't know what I'm talking about. Their podcast can be found on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, you can find them. And follow them on Facebook, Instagram. They're always posting things. It's always entertaining. It's good fun. Hopefully we'll get one or both of them back again, and we can go down the rabbit hole on another movie. And I hope you enjoyed the episode. Like, subscribe, share, and well, we'll see you next time.